I'm Evelyn.
And I'm Robert.
And we just wanted to thank you guys for listening and enjoying our episodes, especially the bonus episodes we've been doing.
Yeah, we've really enjoyed doing these free bonus episodes. But now that Evelyn and I are back to work, we won't have the time to do the free bonus episodes anymore.
Especially the every other week one. However, we will still be continuing to do bonus episodes for our patrons.
And we will still be producing a show every other week following The Lord of the Rings.
Like we've been doing before. Speaking of patrons, we still have our $1 access for our Discord. So come join our other patrons to talk about all things Tolkien, which reminds me, we got a request for you to join and actually start talking with people on Discord.
Okay, whatever that means.
So we'll figure that out. So eventually we'll get Robert on the Discord as well. It's really just been me talking to people right now.
Okay.
But yeah, it's only $1. Come join us. Come talk about all things Tolkien. And we have a lot of fun there. Now we have one patron. We have points on our Discord. And she's just racking up the points. So maybe you guys can go challenge her.
Ooh, a challenge.
All right, so let's get into the episode. So this was a short chapter.
It sure was.
And a short episode because of that.
Right, and it was a short chapter not only in number of pages, but of what happens.
Right, it was more history than anything.
Yeah, and I think part of what happens here is that Tolkien is trying to keep everything in a chapter.
Right.
Related. Just like how you're supposed to properly write a paragraph. Mm-hmm. You know, you only have one main thing you're talking about in a paragraph.
Right.
So he's kind of dividing this book up in chapters where it's only one main chapter.
Yeah, so enjoy this shorter episode. Hey, I'm Evelyn.
And I'm Robert.
And we're talking about it.
So we are now at the chapter 9, which is Sign of the Pony.
Sign of the Prancing Pony.
Sign of the Prancing Pony. Excuse me.
You're welcome. So I had predictions.
Yes, you did.
And I totally forget what they were. So after reviewing our last episode so we could remember, I had predicted that I made some bold predictions.
Yes, you did.
I predicted that they were going to finally meet up with Gandalf.
Yeah.
I predicted that Merry and Pippin were going to get drunk and make a mistake.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about if that was true or not when we get there.
Right.
It could go either way, really. And then I also predicted that there would be either a bar fight or something close to a bar fight.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. So do you want to give a quick summary of what the episode was about? Or, sorry, what the chapter was about?
This chapter, Sign of the Prancing Pony, is about the four hobbits finally reaching Bree. They're able to get into the town of Bree, make their way to the Prancing Pony, which is the inn. They are greeted with welcome arms by the innkeeper. And then once they're in the inn, they are fed. They go into the common room. And then that's where everything happens.
All right. Shall we start?
Shall we start? The answer is yes.
All right. So it really starts with kind of a description and history of Bree and of the surrounding areas. And it's really kind of a small town kind of feel.
Right. But one of the first things I noticed in the description is around Bree, the words Tolkien uses is tamed woodlands. So which is very opposite of what they have come through.
That's right, yeah. And
the Breed folk are used to other races being around, and they're friendly to them.
Yes, they're very friendly. The town itself is rather diverse. They have both big folk and little folk. So they have both humans and hobbits that inhabit it. And it's really interesting to me that both races consider themselves to be the first ones to inhabit the West. Like, the humans think they're the first humans to settle down, and the hobbits believe they're the first hobbits to settle down in the West.
Correct. And the other thing that I found interesting about the humans see themselves as descendants of the first men. So the humans in the area consider themselves descendants of the first men.
Yes.
They saw when the kings returned, and they were there when the kings were no longer there. They were there when the memories of these old kings faded into grass. Into grass basically means even any structures or anything else they did is only a memory because it's now covered by grass.
Yeah.
Talks a little bit about the town itself then.
Yes.
And one of the things I find interesting about some of the hobbits' view of the town is there's more than 1- and 2-story buildings here.
Right.
There must be giants here.
Yeah. And not only that, they talk about the hobbits where hobbits outside the Shire are usually considered uncouth and borderline barbaric, whereas they consider the hobbits of Bree to be some of the few civilized hobbits outside the Shire.
Also, the people of Bree are the same way. They see those from the Shire as outsiders.
Yes. They even refer to them as outsiders.
Yeah, they officially call them outsiders.
Yeah. Yes. So the hobbits are able to finally arrive.
Yes, they finally arrive. And
what I thought was interesting is that in contrast to how friendly everyone was sounding, their very first encounter was a very gruff guardsman.
But he wasn't gruff that long.
True, he did eventually become quite friendly, but when they first show up, he's like, "What do you guys want? Why are you here? There's a lot of outsiders here already."
Right. And so why shouldn't 4 more join them?
True. Though I thought that was really interesting. I highlighted that in the book that more outsiders were there because that's something that we've heard before, where even back in the Shire, we heard rumors of a lot of migration of people walking around where dwarves and elves and even humans are fleeing from the east and the north, where we hear rumblings of evil starting up again. And this is kind of just reaffirming what the rumors that we've already heard, where people are leaving and just passing through, trying to get away from everything that's going on.
Right, yeah. There's things going on that they're not appreciating, and so they're trying to leave. And what's interesting is within the timeline, compared to what's going to happen, there is very little happening as far as fights and unrest at this point. So they're already leaving at this point.
True. And I guess there's even crazier stuff to come. So they finally make it to the inn, and the innkeeper is extremely friendly. And he talks a lot, which I feel in my bones, because I sometimes talk too much.
Yes, you do. But something else that's interesting is as soon as the gatekeeper goes back into his little shack, a dark figure climbs over the gate.
Oh, I missed that.
Well, the innkeeper was very friendly, invites them in, and doesn't even ask them what they want. Goes, "I suppose you want something to eat and a bed," kind of thing.
Right. He immediately shows them to rooms that were specifically made for hobbits.
Which is interesting because that relieves some of those fears that some of the hobbits had coming into town about these being big houses.
Right. Like, they even said it's like it might be better to approach a hobbit and try to get hospitality from them. But they're like, no, Tom Bombadil told us that the inn was good, so let's go ahead and trust them. And they do. They have hobbit rooms on the ground floor.
On the ground floor.
With circular windows. I thought that was just such a nice touch that really shows how integrated everyone is in this town.
Okay.
So they eat their supper, and they decide to go back to the main hall and see the other travelers, the company as they call it, and get some news.
Right, and in there they find men, hobbits, and even some dwarves.
Yes. And they all welcome them. They all give them a hello greeting and welcome them into the pit, and they immediately want to hear stories of the Shire because they don't get many Shire folk anymore. And that's something I thought was really interesting. They talk about how people of the Shire and other hobbits used to travel a lot in the past, but not anymore. So news of the Shire was rather scarce. So Pippin especially is in his element, but Sam as well. They are both sharing some interesting stories about the Shire, and they are enjoying the attention.
Right, and Pippin and Merry are enjoying themselves maybe a bit too much.
Right. So this comes back to one of my predictions. So am I right, or is this not right enough where they get drunk and make mistakes?
I don't think it's right enough. They're not getting drunk so much so basking in the attention and trying to keep the attention on them.
Right. And one of the things that Pippin starts talking about is Bilbo's birthday party. And while he's talking about it, it makes Frodo nervous, but I don't think that it's enough to really be considered a mistake, because he doesn't say, like, Frodo is a Baggins, but I guess it is a mistake to bring the thought of Baggins into people's minds, because the legend of Bilbo vanishing is known at this time.
Even though it's many years later, it's still known and talked about in some quarters.
Right. So while I guess this is technically a mistake, it's not that big of a mistake as I was expecting. Like, I was expecting Pippin or Merry to, like, blow the cover. Explicitly blow the cover. So I would argue that I'm half right.
Okay.
That I was close.
So, but, yeah, you're a little closer to right, because that dark stranger sitting in the shadows calls Frodo over, and this guy looks really shady.
Right.
He's wearing a hood, even though it's warm inside. He's been watching the hobbits very carefully.
Yes.
We do find out that he's a ranger.
Yeah, that was something that I found really interesting, that they were describing the Rangers as these wanderers that have these powers of talking to birds and beasts and such.
Right, they have strange powers of sight and hearing. Now, here's an interesting token note, okay?
Okay.
So, Ranger has roots in the French language, not in Old English. Which is something unusual for Tolkien to do.
Okay.
So there's speculation of why he might have done this. One is that if they're going to use the English equivalent, it would have been warden. And at this time, a warden is more seen as a person in charge of a prison.
Okay.
Other than keeping ward over a particular area.
Okay.
But it also has those special force underlyings as well.
Okay.
Because there are special forces known as the Rangers.
Huh.
So it's interesting that he would go this way, since it's away from his normal pattern.
But I mean, it would make sense if in the current lexicon, warden does mean something different than what he intends it for.
Right. So
So we meet Strider, and without any spoilers, I know Strider is important.
Right. Also, something else that's interesting is that Strider's name originally was Trotter.
Huh.
And Tolkien's notes and everything in his handwritten manuscript and so forth, he originally called him Trotter.
Interesting.
And his son Christopher, and Tolkien's son Christopher, even talks about this character at the time when he's known as Trotter is not an important figure in the book, but as he keeps writing, Strider becomes a little more important.
Gotcha. Okay.
But the man we will now call Strider, who's sitting in the shadows, invites Frodo over and suggests that he stop his friends for talking so much.
Right. Yeah, they're talking a little bit too much, and he warns them basically to shut up.
Right. So, what does Frodo do? He jumps up on a table.
And starts to sing a song.
Keep that. And a well-written song by Bilbo himself.
Absolutely. We are not going to sing it because it's long. But he sings the song and everyone applauds. They are impressed with Frodo's singing voice. And it's a fun, jaunty song.
And it's so much fun, they get him to drink a little bit and encourage him to sing it again.
With fiddles.
With fiddles. And as he's singing and trying to dance,
Well, first, before we get to that, they start singing along. It's so catchy. They're getting the lyrics, and they're like, we want to join. This is a great song.
And what's really interesting is, the origins of this for Tolkien is the Cat and the Fiddle nursery rhyme.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, I did notice that there were some similarities with that, yeah. So, as Frodo is singing, and had a bit to drink,
he tumbles off the table and disappears.
Right. This I thought was really interesting because I was confused for a half a second, being like, wait, how did he disappear? He was holding on to the ring, but he didn't put it on. But that's what they say. He disappears. He quickly goes to a corner and takes off the ring, and even he's confused as to how the ring got on it. And this is just another instance in showing that the ring is alive. The ring is doing its own thing. The ring is a hot mess express.
Yeah, somehow, somewhat, the ring is trying to make itself present.
Right.
And we know that's not unusual at this point.
Right. We know the ring is trying to get noticed.
Yes. Maybe even trying to get back home.
Right.
And what's very interesting, though, is after... one of the things I found interesting is that after Frodo falls off the table, it kind of clears the room a little bit.
A little bit? Everyone's like, that wasn't a nice trick. I don't like this trick. We're going to bed. Bye.
Yeah, now...
And everyone that was so friendly to them leaves without saying goodbye to any of them.
Right. And what's also interesting is Tolkien's turn of phrase here. As one of the men is being told, nothing strange happened here. He says, I saw what I saw and I saw what I didn't.
Yeah.
That's a very Tolkien turn of phrase.
It is. So the room clears out and Strider goes up to Frodo and he's like, we should talk in private.
Mr. Baggins.
Yep.
He calls him by his name. So naturally, shady looking guy in the corner, keeping his face hidden, knows his name. Boom, boom, boom.
Right.
What's coming next?
So, for predictions for this time, I'm not going to make the prediction that I know is true, because I do know the spoiler from obviously watching the movies. So I'm not going to state what I actually know. I'm going to go ahead and make predictions for stuff I obviously don't know.
What's the name of the next chapter?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know.
And what's the name of the next chapter?
It is called Strider.
Go figure.
Right. So obviously we're going to learn who Strider is, so that's not going to be a real prediction for me, especially since I already know who he is. But we're not going to say it in this episode because of spoilers. Unless, of course, you saw the movie, then you know. So what I am going to predict is... I'm going to make another bold prediction and say that Gandalf is going to finally show up again.
How is he going to show up again if he hasn't shown up yet?
I'm making the prediction again.
Oh.
So I
say what you mean and mean what you say. Because I saw what I saw and I saw what I didn't.
Rude. I am going to predict that Gandalf is going to show up in this chapter. I feel like Gandalf is due to show up, and I'm going to go ahead and predict that he does show up. I am going to predict that Frodo is going to chide Merry and Pippin a little bit for being a little too forthcoming with information.
Well, remember, too... it's not that unusual. I mean, they're young folk.
Yeah, they're young. They're not quite at age. But yeah, so I would say... So I'm also going to predict that Frodo's going to chide Merry and Pippin a little bit for being too forthcoming with some information. And... I don't have another prediction, honestly. I feel like it's very straightforward that we're just going to learn about Strider in this next chapter. I don't think that much is going to happen, honestly, except for possibly Gandalf showing up.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So, some boring predictions for this time, but I feel like it's going to be a straightforward chapter. Can I just make that prediction? Can I say it's going to be a straightforward chapter and there's not going to be a twist?
Sure. It's a straightforward chapter and there's not going to be any surprise information.
Well, besides the surprise information that I already know is coming.
Correct.
Okay.
But are you still going to predict Gandalf showing up?
I am still going to predict Gandalf showing up, and I am still going to predict Merry and Pippin getting chided. But I'm going to make that third prediction that it's going to be a very straightforward chapter without any twist besides the one that we know as a spoiler.
So
one twist. There will only be one twist. I'll say that.
So it's not going to go off the rails, basically.
Right.
Okay.
It's not going to go off the rails. It's going to be straightforward with them getting the next step to where they should be going and what they should be doing.
Okay.
It'll be It'll be a transfer chapter where they're now at point B and they'll learn where they need to be for point C.
Okay. Sounds good.
So, what did you think about this chapter? Did we miss anything we needed to talk about?
Well, one of the things we kind of missed was the innkeeper keeps going, there's something I need to remember. There's something I need to remember when he sees the four show up. And then even right towards the end of this chapter, he tells Frodo that he wants to talk with him in private.
Oh, that's right. He also wants to talk with him in private.
And then we also have a footnote.
Yes, we have a footnote.
So the footnote is that the men were not leaving the north. The men were leaving the south.
So for all of you who were yelling at me earlier in the episode being, it wasn't the north, it was the south, I apologize. I misread and I misstated. So Dad corrected for me.
And not only are they from the south, it says that the men are looking for a place that they can find peace.
Right. That was something we were talking about, yeah.
Okay, well, I believe that's it.
All right. Well, I've been Evelyn.
And I've been Robert.
And we're talking about it.
Thank you so much for listening. I have been Robert.
And I have been Evelyn.
Podcasters are Robert and Evelyn Lewis.
Edited by Evelyn Lewis.
Produced by Robert Lewis, Evelyn Lewis, Regina, and Comic Canary.
Music provided by Ben Sound. Link in the description.
Support us on Patreon at Talking About It Podcast.
Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Talking About It.
And Twitter at TokenPod.
Thank you all again for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.